Y'all might think this is a video on raising youth. It's actually a video on sexism for the most part. Just as those people that I worked with in North Carolina during Hurricane Matthew um, said it's just what their daddy taught them or what their granddaddy taught them. That's how education happens. When you say one thing and you do another, that's going to be confusing for anybody. It's especially difficult for me when I know that many people use their voices in ways that are not appropriate. CCR type. Good afternoon, Sean. I love the revival. Maybe we could play some of that on here someday. It's probably copyrighted though, and I'll probably get in trouble. Um, a lot of times, what we want when it comes to having a villain and having a good guy, um, we want somebody who looks the part. That's what's important. A homeless person would never save you. They're homeless people. I've seen homeless people rescue quite a few people that aren't homeless. My older brother, he's saved a lot more lives than I have. See, I passed out blankets because I couldn't handle the violence. I couldn't stand it. I stayed at Starbucks because it's not a violent place. And if it does get violent, I got backup. I'll stand up. I'll take an ass whooping for free. Keep somebody innocent from getting beat up. Oh, hell's the fuck yes. And in Starbucks, usually it was somebody who had an issue with the staff. He was just having a bad day and needed somebody to take it out on, and the staff members at Starbucks were the ones he picked. One of them guys at Starbucks, his name was Aaron. He was probably 6'4", starting to go bald just barely. Um, because of his size, he's the one that all the managers and assistant managers picked to have kick people out when it was time for him to go. So one day there was some homeless folks, and mind you, not all homeless folks are like this. Most of us aren't. They cornered him over by the dumpster when he went to take out the trash, and had knives and other such threats. After that situation, whenever somebody went out to the garbage can, I walked with them for their own safety. And I did that for about 7 years. There was a lot of people that worked at Starbucks who spoke up for me to start, but afterwards, just like most of the people that wanted to help me, after they caught Natalie's killer, people thought that was the end of it. Not even close. I still had people calling me and threatening me. I still get that shit to this day. People calling me a murderer, and the problem is getting the police to look at that. Not my jurisdiction, not my jurisdiction. Deputy Holloway here finally said something different. And that's one of the things I'm bringing up in court. All this time, the police been saying they can't, they can't, they can't, they can't, they can't. They just won't, and they haven't. And that's what Deputy Holloway, he called it human nature. Yeah. Well, if your cops are stuck on that part of human nature, then they shouldn't be cops. When you teach your daughter that little boy hit her because he liked her, you're teaching her something deep seated and psychological. When kids are young, they're sponges for that shit. That's why when you lie to them, it fucking sticks. When you tell them about Santa Claus and the Easter Bunny, that's one thing. But there's a lot of other things, like that little boy hit her because he likes her. That's bullshit. You don't teach a kid that. You don't teach boys that either. But boys, well, boys get treated different when they're abused than girls do. That doesn't mean the girls don't get abused in such fashion. And it doesn't mean that it's that way for all boys. But for the most part, yeah, we're not heard. It gets to the point where we're told that we have to do it ourselves enough. And most of the women I know, even the ones who aren't pretty and aren't rich, if they ask for help, there's good people that'll help them out. There are some women who are really pretty and they know it and they use it. Jamie's one of those women. Lana used to be long before I met her. Some of the techniques that she used on me to get me to do stuff for her, she never had to use on men before that, because men just basically did what she wanted. But for me, I'm not sexually motivated. We teach little girls that all a man thinks with is his penis. We literally teach that to little girls nationwide. Everywhere that I have ever been, most people teach their daughters that. They don't even bring up the fact that women have sexual urges as well. We've got a lot of these parents who they were irresponsible children. Most of them got messed up on drugs or alcohol while underage. Stupid fly. Maybe he's a smart fly. Might not have to look at me. So goes life. Where was I at? What we teach our daughters and what we teach our sons, it's not the same. And I know there was a point I was trying to make, but I got derailed by a fly. And that does happen often, especially with all of the stuff that I've gone through in the last few years. I mean, I'd already gone through a whole lifetime of hell before that. We teach boys and girls this, whether those girls go on to become bikers or gang members or police officers. Thank you, Casey Steele. She typed, you were saying women are taught men thing with their penis. Yeah, all men think with their penis, and it's all about sex. Meanwhile, women stalk men and women at a far greater rate than any man has ever stalked a woman. Now, this, even considering the fact that women aren't likely to be charged with that crime, they're not likely to get more than a slap on the wrist if they do get in trouble for such a crime. And they have to be a repeat offender before anything happens. They also have to have evidence against them, which you don't have to have evidence against a man. All you have to do is say the words, and people want to believe you, and they start hating that other person. They start thinking emotionally immediately. Same thing that happens when you call somebody a child molester. Oh, that makes people's fucking blood boil. And you don't have to commit these crimes in order to get the punishment. For me, as soon as I started getting the punishment for crimes that I didn't commit, I started trying to get a lawyer and started trying to get a court date, started trying to get the police to actually listen to me. I mean, by this point, it's a whole year before Natalie was killed that this stuff started. And it was all over somebody who didn't tell the truth, who used the word stalker when I didn't stalk her. And because she used that word, people stalked me. People physically harmed me. Everything that I did was wrong no matter what. When she did those things, everybody made excuses for her and her friends who were doing these terrible things to me. And I am trying to get help at this point. And for a whole year, the cops brushed me off no matter what, using jurisdiction as their excuse. And then when Natalie disappeared, people were like, oh, well, you see, look at how you acted. Look how you treated her. Look at this. Look at that. You know, it's no wonder that the police came after you. I'm like, hey, I'd been trying to get the police to fucking do something for over a year before that. I needed help. But because of my gender, that help isn't there. Those people aren't as likely to do their jobs when it's a male, especially when you don't have children. And why do most of these people that I know have children? Because they were irresponsible and had unprotected sex while messed up on drugs or alcohol. Many of these people have used their children to get me to help them. But then, when all I want is for them to come forward and tell the truth, they tell me they can't and their children are their excuse. Is that a valid excuse? I personally think that it is a valid excuse, first of all. But second of all, these people individually are only thinking about their own kids. Mandy Hughes, she's thinking about her kids. Miss Jerry, thinking about her kids. We got Peaches thinking about her kids. We got Candace thinking about her kids. All of these people have families that they can see. They aren't having to deal with being abused just for existing in public. They're not dealing with being forced into public after being accused of such things. You guys want to talk about her murder. And oh well, you know, after that it should have been done and over with. No, that's the thing, is that it was terrible for a whole year beforehand. Do you think I was trying to get a court date for a whole year before Natalie died? Because she died? No, she wasn't dead yet. So what possible reason could I have for trying to get a lawyer, for talking to Jeff Ritter and trying to get that done, for jumping through all these hoops for all these people who promised to help? What the hell do you think I was trying to take her to court for? But the way that we teach boys and girls is different. Boys need to shut up, get to the back of the bus. Your problems aren't as bad as everyone else's because you're a boy. Your problems aren't as bad as everyone else's because you're white. You don't know what the hell we're talking about because. You know, I don't have to know what the hell you're talking about to try to put myself in your shoes when you're talking about it. That's the first thing that I do. I'm not trying to come up with solutions for you when you're telling me your story. You know what I'm doing that most people don't? I'm listening to your story. I'm not going to give you advice unless you cue me to do so. But then again, that was back when I could help people in person. Now all I can do is talk to them. Miss Peaches, it didn't register to her at any point in time that she gets to see all of my loved ones. She's friends with most of them. And I don't. This wasn't occurring to Maddie Boa or Natalie Bollinger or Alicia Bollinger. They just simply didn't care. And we teach girls not to care after they've done something terrible like that. We teach girls to get their friends involved. And when they get their girlfriends involved, guys are supposed to protect girls. That's what our job is. We get ingrained this in our brain from when we're fucking, almost from when we're born. Your job is to protect women. It's gotten to the point where many men need protected from women because of these evil things that we train little girls to do. Every time she sees mom and her friends from the church group talking about the terrible things that they're going to do to one of the dudes who's the husband of someone in that group, because she thinks he might be cheating, or she thinks he might be this, or she thinks he might do that. And they go do all this horrible shit to him, not using a court of law, just running around destroying his life because they want to know. They want to know. They have to know. I'm like, holy shit. These are human beings' lives that you're destroying. And we're teaching this as a society. We're teaching girls to destroy the lives of the people that we've taught to protect them. And then the ones that do protect them, they get the worst of it. The ones that don't protect them, that abuse them, that just want sex, they're the ones that y'all date because you get fucked up on drugs and then you get horny and then someone has sex with you. And you're like, all right, well that's kind of what I wanted, kind of. And I see this all the time, and people are like, you made all these videos about Natalie. I'm like, I've made very few videos about Natalie. Most of those videos are about the state of the union, the way that people in America fucking think, the excuses that they make. When it happens to somebody else, it's okay, but when it happens to you, it's wrong. That Martin Niemöller, oh wow, those flies were really getting at it, weren't they? That Martin Niemöller poem, I want you guys to look that up. It's called When They Came. Men, boys start killing themselves at 15 years of age at 5 times the rate of girls because we're not allowed to have or express emotion. We have to bottle it in. And I get to hear a lot about how women have to bottle it in. Well, see, if you have to bottle it in, you understand, and I've seen you blow up. It's okay for you, but it's not okay for a man. You say that's because a man is stronger than a woman. Meanwhile, I'm half your size, so that goes out the window. I'm smaller than most of the women in this town. There's a lot of them that are shorter than me, but if they wanted to knock me out, they're big enough to punch me in the face and knock me out with one punch. Big enough to knock you out, too. Some of them are big enough to knock out Tyson. Cherry, I think a lot of men do understand how much women bought lit. I also understand the victim mentality. I understand that a lot of people, once they learn that being victimized is love, they are with somebody who doesn't understand that they're bottling it in, that they have to. For me, a lot of years I had to bottle it in, and move on and move on. When it got to the point where I couldn't, that's when I left Virginia. My back was too screwed up for me to take care of myself. And then I got this adult calling me a stalker for doing what she asked and doing what her sister asked. For almost a whole month, I did everything that they asked, with the exception of trying to get an apartment there. I didn't want to live there. But a lot of the people who got involved after that, they're like, you don't talk to a woman like that. I'm like, fuck you. If I am going to be physically harmed by males, a lot of people will type to me, haha, you're afraid of a little girl. A lot of people said, haha, you're afraid of a little girl. It wasn't that little girl in specific that I was afraid of. It was the way that people are taught, and when somebody tells a fucking nasty little rumor like that because they're on fucking drugs, it destroys another human being's life. It made it so that I couldn't go see my loved ones. And if I did, I had to deal with people getting actually physically violent with me. I had to deal with people like Tim Beeson fucking harassing me on the internet when I'm having a hard enough time coping with all of this bullshit and the fact that I can't take care of myself. And, ever since then, I've had a caseworker. One, her name was Tamara, and she knew what the fuck was going on. And then you guys who have heard those conversations between me and Jen Beebe, or me and Jen Beebe's boss, you know that they can't get a hold of her. But she was my last actual caseworker. All the rest of them were just words. I mean, for me, it's 3 years after Virginia, and police haven't done anything about the harassment or stalking that I'd endured that whole time. With the police not willing to do their jobs, I was literally forced to break the law to try to get the actual violence against me to stop. For the rest of my life, I'm going to have to deal with this. I don't like people anymore. I don't want to see people. I want their lives to be better, and I want to spend the rest of my life in this fucking trailer building things to make other people's lives better because my life fucking sucks. And with all the shit that has happened, it's going to be difficult for me to have anything even closely approaching a decent life. I'm not talking about being victimized for love. I mean, women are raised, at least my generation, to be strong, to be leaders, whether you have that in you or not. Well, that's the thing, is that silence is not a leader. Silence is out of fear of retribution, and not even retribution necessarily from your assailant. Oh, sorry. Terry and Casey are both on here, so I'm getting them confused. I apologize. I'm not trying to be an asshole. The women that I know that are the strongest stood up to their predators, and they took their predators down. Train. Don't you know that sound of the man working on the chain? Yeah, kick back. Carrie, you are absolutely right. It is hard for a child to take down a predator, but I want to tell you something. When my predators did things to me, it was in institutions in most of those cases. Well, many of those cases. I would honestly have to say that most of those cases, especially of repeat offenders, were in the temporary foster care system. Some of those places, it's 2 weeks worth of getting abused. But I do want to state for the record that some of those places were absolute paradise compared to anywhere else that I've ever been. My very first foster home I went into when I was 4. Oh my God, that place was wonderful. And I had my older brother there with me, and it was before all this fucked up shit happened. I mean, sure, we weren't living with our parents because they were on fucking drugs, but we were living with a good family who cared about us and cared for us and taught us things. I always kind of took after my older brother, mostly because, not because I idolized him, because I loved him. And if we weren't interested in the same things, he wasn't hanging out with me. I got a spot right in the center of my spine that itches. It's right above the spot where my back is the most screwed up. So trying to scratch it. And we do teach girls that they need to bottle it up. We teach boys that they need to bottle it up. We teach a lot of people that they need to bottle it up. The strongest ones, though, are the ones who come forward. The strongest ones are the ones who come forward and take their predators down. You got two choices. You can either wallow in the bottle or try to cope by snorting it up your nose or smoking it or whatever it happens to be that you use as a coping mechanism. For most of you, it is alcohol because alcohol is legal. Meth is a big one right now, too. And that's how you cope with it. Then there's the motherfuckers who go, you know what? I'm not going to let them do that to somebody else. I am going to speak out. But speaking out is only part of it. If you're going to speak out, you need to take it to court. You deserve it, and so do they. It's our right as Americans. Well, it's supposed to be all right as Americans, but if you look at the way the homeless are treated, you realize that if you're homeless, you're not an American. You look at all of the laws and the rules and jurisdictions and all of this other crap that goes along with it, you realize that, yeah, homeless people are not human beings, even to citizens of this country. If you're homeless, you mean less than, well, we have permanent camps. You know how we're always complaining about how we have these ice camps over by the border, or we have that ice camp up in Washington State where they have all these foreign people, right? So we've got all these foreign people that are in these ice camps, and I'm speaking out for them. I don't think it's right for them to be treated that way, but then again, I know how they're being treated. The jails aren't much better. Matter of fact, the jails aren't better. They have better services because they're more long term. These ICE places, they're set up pretty fucking quick, aren't they? Donald Trump we want all the foreigners out. And what do? Jump to make concentration camps. The whole world took a look at what we did to the Japanese. Fuck, my words aren't coming out right. we saw the whole world over what America did to people who were of Japanese ancestry. All right, we got to see that. And yeah, that wasn't as bad as a concentration camp. These are fucking human beings, and we treated them like cattle. I mean, they were basically put into what's the equivalent of old cavalry barracks. A lot of these places had dirt floors. Exactly, Carrie. Carrie type stations for men and women are fucked. We need to learn from history and not ignore. That's right. I'm gonna tell you something about Natalie and Alicia's mom, Rose. When she was younger, she was a hellion. She was into doing drugs, getting drunk, and having sex. For me, all of my intentions were good, but no matter what, people didn't want to hear that. They wanted to pretend that my intentions were sexual. No matter what the situation, my intentions must be sexual. No, that's the thing with Jamie. When Jamie decided that she wanted to have a sexual relationship with me, it was just in fun. I wasn't down with that, and I had to decide who I cared about more, sex or her son. I care about her son more, obviously. With Rihanna and Amy's kids, obviously I care more about Amy's kids, who I barely know, than I care about Rihanna, and I love Rihanna very much. That's right, train. So while we're busy, that one's kind of flappy, ain't it? While we're busy treating men and women and boys and girls like they're different, while we're busy saying one thing and doing another, we're having, dang, there are some loud friggin' cars on that. They got a place right outside of Sydney where I want to say it's called Prestolite, but I could be wrong. And they service these trains. They service the wheel units. They do a lot of welding up there, and I guess they also, to some degree, fixed a lot of the rail cars. So they hire on a lot of welders. That's why ag shop is so important around here. Now, ag shop is more of a boys thing. Now, you notice what I did there. Went from the trains to what it is I was talking about before. That's an OCD trait, but it's kind of in reverse, because instead of just going off on a tangent, because I understand how all these things are related, I'm trying to bring it back to the related situation. Rose M. Kelly worked for a construction company there, the very same construction company that Natalie and Alicia were trying to get me a job at. And I've already proven this as well from messages between Natalie and I. and Alicia and I. This is during the time when I supposedly stalked them. This is while I was in Virginia at Natalie's request. A lot of you got to see the messages between her and I where, of course, the conversations were a lot more in depth, and it would have been nice to save those, but your phone automatically saves text messages. So I got lucky on that. And it shows that Natalie and I were friends when I supposedly stalked her. That yes, indeed, it was her idea. And her sister's idea. And if you look at the things that they were doing while I was there in Virginia, and also the reason that I was there, I mean, the fact is, I just got screwed for being the good guy. And that's happened repeatedly through this. And then people want to get pissed off because I use curse words and call people names like shit. I've had to deal with that since well before most of y'all were even born. I know how to be an abusive male. I know how to give off the signs of being an abusive male. I know exactly how to do that. And I also know that for the most part, the difference between keeping around an abusive male and getting rid of him comes down to bills and sex. I'm not going to pay your bills and I'm not going to have sex with you. So you're definitely not going to accept it from me. But you'll accept it from that asshole. And you'll allow people to do that to me over things that I didn't do. And people will tell me that I deserve it, that I wanted it, that I had it coming. But you don't treat the people who did these things to me that way, the people who actually were physically harming me. For a whole year after I left Virginia, I just wanted people to stop physically harming me for things that I didn't do, just because Natalie's pride was hurt. I needed to get help, and I was cut off from that help because Natalie's pride was hurt. When she asked her friends for help, it's because she needed help from a terrible stalker. No, she fucking didn't. She needed to ask these people to knock it the fuck off and tell them the fucking truth. For me, when I asked for help, she was like, he's harassing my friends. I'm like, I'm trying to get help with a situation that you could put a stop to if you wanted to be a fucking adult for 5 goddamn minutes. But she was taught different. Her mom was taught different. Her grandmother was obviously taught different. All of these women in that situation who deal with their situation by getting fucked up on drugs and alcohol, and that is how they cope. Instead of going after their predator, their mutual predator, Ted Bollinger, they wanted to come after me and make my life hell. For almost an entire year after she disappeared, her family fucked with me and fucked with me and fucked with me, and so did their friends, threatening and harassing, pretending like they're going to help me, and then slandering me in fucking Facebook groups. Hey, Sean, if you send me everything, I'll send it to the police. And I send you everything, and what do? You post up little bits and pieces that try to make me look like a bad guy in these supposed justice for Natalie groups. You're not trying to get justice for Natalie. And people say, well, I thought this stopped after they found Natalie's killer. No, it fucking didn't. The people in this town that I know in real life are going to remember this for the rest of their life. This is the first thing that they're going to think of when they look at me. In a small town, people like to talk, and that's the first thing that they talk about. And when they come and see you, they're going to do the whole bless their heart thing. Oh, I didn't hear nothing. I didn't know nothing. Or, I heard a little something about that. No, the fuck you didn't. You listened to everybody but me, just like everybody else in the fucking town. That's how small towns work. CCR, Creedence Clearwater Revival. Yeah. And you know what, Casey, you're right. It is always the good guys and girls that get screwed. Natalie wasn't a bad person. Her and I, she was my best friend, all right? There's a reason that she was my best friend. It's because she was a wonderful person to me. When everybody else was just words, she showed up, all right? She kept her word. A lot of the things that she was able to do, Maddie Boa couldn't, but Maddie Boa was showing up too and doing her best to keep her word. And that's who I had. That was my entire support network. When I went to Virginia, I set it up so that I had a huge support network. There's a lot of history. I mean, it's fucking Virginia, for Christ's sake. Two of the things that I'm into the most are how people work and how things work. And the Civil War and the Revolutionary War are two of my favorite wars to learn about because of that. Why did people do these things? Why did they build these things? What did they use these things for then, and what do we use them for now? Is it the same? Is it different? Are they made from the same things? Are they made in the same way? If I lived back then, could I make one of those? If I lived 20 years ago, could I? 40 years ago, 80 years ago, could I make World War II stuff? You know, in most of these cases, if I got the tools, I can. That's not going to be any sort of guarantee that it's going to be the right quality. But then you look at World War II, when most of these factories were first starting, they had a lot of people that didn't know what the hell they were doing. Some of them, it was the first time they'd ever picked up a welder. It's not going to be pretty. But we want to teach our kids that if there's a problem, you go to the police. A lot of parents won't teach their kids that anymore. A lot of black kids that I know, they were taught, hey, if you get pulled over by the police, you don't mouth off. No matter how wrong they may be, you don't mouth off. You keep your hands on the steering wheel. They will shoot you. And you say, oh, well, we shouldn't worry about they. Not all cops are shooting black people. Enough of them do. Enough of them do that an entire many generations of drivers have to be taught that, have to be taught how not to get shot by a police officer because they don't know enough black people not to be afraid of you just because you're black. A lot of the differences that we teach between boys and girls aren't actually there. We pretend that they are. We have this war of the sexes that has been going on the entirety of my life, the entirety of my dad's life, my grandfather's life. I mean, it goes all the way back through history. And I see women as human beings. A lot of people get pissed off because once I see 30 or 40 posts from people who are women being terrible about men, I'll make a post about women saying the same kind of shit. Because it is true. There are women who do these things. A lot of them. A lot of the things that women are taught to do to retaliate are far worse than what a man is taught to do. A man is taught, well, you walk away from the situation or you defend yourself if you have to. A girl is taught to go to her friends, and some of her friends are men. And a lot of her men friends think of her in a sexual fashion and will beat people up for her because they think being the dominant male monkey pig dog will impress her. Tim Beeson was doing this in our texting and conversations. He's a big Billy badass who's gonna fucking put me in the ground. No, he isn't. He's a bitch. The way that I've been treated the last several years, Officer Waylon Lolatai assaulted me within 2 weeks of Natalie disappearing. And that was ever since Natalie disappeared, me trying to get a police officer to listen. Before that, I'd tried to, and I'd given up. The cops kept on human nature, as Holloway put it. They kept on human naturing me. Human nature. A lot of you don't even realize that you're doing it. A lot of you guys who stare at a black person in McDonald's because you've never seen a black person, you don't even realize you're staring at them, but you're staring at them. It's the same thing. You don't want us to judge all cops based on the way that most cops treat the homeless. Then again, it's a founded fear. There is a history of police doing these things, and you want me to not be afraid. We're not talking about a little bit of history. We're talking about a lot of history and a lot of recent history. There are officers in almost all of these counties that I was in Colorado who have been charged with sexual abuse, sexual misconduct since I was in those places, and quite a few before. Those same jurisdictions, though, I was dealing with those officers far before I was ever incarcerated. And in dealing with those officers and trying to get them to look at evidence, it was pretty obvious that no matter what, I was going to have to break the law, because they kept on using the mentally ill thing. And when I had to go in alone, people were like, why don't you just go into the police station? Because if I go in alone, they'll do what it is that they do when a homeless person goes in alone into the police station, especially when you have to turn in another officer. Officers were involved in doing wrong things before and after Natalie died. That's what a lot of people aren't understanding. By Waylon Lolatai charging me with assault against a police officer, a felony, that is on my permanent record. They dropped the charges, and he was the one who by rights should have been charged. But they claimed that I had a weapon. Where's the weapon in that video? It's on this YouTube. Some of you have seen it. Where is that weapon? He claimed I tried to bite him. Look at how many teeth I have. I have literally 0 teeth. What am I going to bite him with? He tried to bite us. No, I wasn't trying to bite. I was screaming for help. And that's why they didn't allow those body cameras in that court date. That's why those body cameras were never turned over to my public pretender. Because their narrative and what actually happened were not the same. At least in that video, without any sounds, they can pretend whatever they want, just like they did at Clearview. At Clearview, they tried pretending they didn't do to me what it is that they later killed 2 people doing. Oh no, we wouldn't do that. And then they killed 2 people doing exactly that. And people want to call me a liar. These are among 2 of the people who are dead, who wouldn't be if police had listened to me, if the public had listened to me, if the news had listened to me. Since the assault by Waylon Lolatai, there has been a special on him, on Denver 7, Tony Kovaleski, about him doing that to people. And they try to make it out to be a race issue. It's not. In all of those cases that they bring up, it's a homeless issue. They are allowed to treat homeless people that way and are pressured to do so. But they got away with it. They use the news and the fact that these news stations won't listen to a homeless person. See, that's the thing about Tony Kovaleski, the 3 people that he spoke about, they weren't homeless. But it was assumed that they were homeless, and he didn't bring that up. Meanwhile, the conversations between myself and Darren O'Connor, who's involved in that case, proved that, yes, it was a homeless issue. They pushed the race card, and it wasn't a racial issue. Now, don't get me wrong, because they were assumed to be minorities and homeless. They were still given the runarounds if they were homeless. But then again, when you got somebody screaming out the door that you live there and they're pointing a video camera, they're not going to do what it is they would have done to a homeless person. Zed Atkinson would have been slammed against the ground. He would have had road rash on his face. They would have been twisting his arm, trying to break it, and telling him to stop resisting. It's called pain compliance, and it is torture, and at least he didn't have to go through that. But he is afraid of the police in Boulder, and he has a roof over his head. If I go to Boulder, I got nothing. And I end up with people who I was never anything but good to assaulting me over things that I never did, to people that I was never anything but good to. When it got to the point where I had to defend myself, that's what I did. People say, you should have just walked away. I did. I drove 1,700 miles away from that situation. But we teach boys and girls different. Those officers are taught the same bullshit about homeless people that you are. And they believe that's fucking bullshit. They're taught the same thing about men and women that you are. That's why they're more likely to listen to a woman than to a man. They will break the law for a woman if she tells the right lie. And officers will for surely break the law for each other. Clearview was also something that Kovaleski reported on, not once but twice. Once because they were keeping people longer than they should, like they did with me. I needed to be able to get a lawyer and to get help, to take these people to court, not be locked up in an institution. Certainly not assaulted and drugged by babysitters. I mean, these are people who, before they worked at Clearview, probably worked at Slurpee Mart. And Tony Kovaleski, his thing on Clearview, he did a second one because the things that people called me a liar for saying that these people did to me. They killed 2 people doing those things. Literally killed. I want you to type in Clearview Behavioral Health. You'll see a bunch of videos from me, but you will also see at the very top the news and what they had to say about the situation. I have the issue of being a male, and males are treated in a certain way. Their abuse isn't as bad as a female's because a man is able to more emotionally handle it. No, just because you expect us to doesn't mean that we are. The way that Natalie handled it had a lot of males expressing male aggression towards me, somebody who had not done her any wrong. And then when she wanted to claim that I slandered her name, no, I told the truth. I posted up an email from her. And the very next day, her last public post, the very next day, that's when she made that. She didn't like the fact that I exposed her dad on his own email or on his own Facebook with her email. I needed the violence to stop. Just 3 days before I exposed him, I tried to get a hold of her mom and explain the situation and tried to get her to put a stop to it. She didn't fucking care. But after Natalie was dead, she definitely cared to get onto my Facebook, call me a stalker, make it a point to try to pretend like I was the person who did these terrible things. Meanwhile, I'm trying to find Natalie at this point. I'm trying to help to get her safe. I'm offering her all of the money that I have for her to get somewhere safe. This is what happens when a woman plays victim. It destroys a man's life. And when you call him mentally ill, that magically justifies all of it. And that is not okay.